Welcome to the Future in Tech webcast. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, founding partner, principal analyst at Futurum Research, joined by my esteemed colleague, senior analyst and research director, Olivier Blanchard, who's joining me on this Wednesday. I wanted to say Friday, but it's a Wednesday just before Thanksgiving, as we are enjoying just the slightest bit of slowdown in our daily grind and ahead of a week that will bring us, I think, more than 7 different events, including AWS's reInvent, Snapdragon Summit from Qualcomm, and a whole plethora of other big tech events that will take us through the rest of 2020. Speaking of 2020, what a crazy year it's been. My gosh, am I ready for a new number at the end of that 2024? I just want to skip right through all this. But as vaccine hopes are starting to come to light, therapeutics and various different standards of care are driving better outcomes. Let's just hope that this huge spike in cases is going to be met with the healthcare's best. And of course, to everybody out there that if you are listening to this, we hope you've had or are having a wonderful Thanksgiving. Olivier, how you doing today?
Good. It's good to be back. The original team is back together again. It's
We're
like
getting
I'm the second Beatle.
we're getting the band back together. I'll call you Ringo.
Oh shit. Not the right one.
You know, I'm very Paul myself.
Yeah.
So as a quick disclaimer, just note this show is for information and entertainment purposes only. And while we will be talking about publicly traded companies, just know that nothing we are doing here should be considered financial advice. So on this show, we've got a great topic, something I'm really eager to talk about, something, Olivia, I know you really enjoy talking about. We spent a lot of time digging into the regulatory environment, intellectual property, innovation, and the EU, your home, right? Your true home as a French citizen.
My home, right through home, yeah.
Tends to be a very interesting set of countries with a uniquely run committee on competition headed by Margaret Vestager, who has come out over the past several weeks and announced a plan to move forward with a couple of significant probes around Amazon and Amazon's some anti-competitive behaviors as Vestager sees it. And so I thought we could take a little time today to dig in. Now, I did write a short piece about it, and I've written some market watch pieces focused on Amazon and its general competitive outlook and regulation here in the US. But you are in the middle of working on a longer research brief, which we will be publishing soon, maybe already. So check the links below if you are watching this now. It may already be out, where you really dug into this. So my thought process is, well, I certainly could take a stab at the complaints. You've looked very closely at this. So maybe outline for everybody, Olivia, what Vestager and the competition committee in the EU is looking at. And, give me your first take on if Amazon should be worried.
Right. Well, okay. So, wow. It's a lot. So, the first thing I should preface everything I'm going to say with an observation, and it's something that we've written about over the years, and it's that the EU has a very protective kind of posture towards, especially large businesses from overseas coming into Europe and operating in Europe. And I don't want to be cynical and I don't want to throw wild accusations in any direction, but one could look at the way that the European Commission and specifically Margaret's team has historically gone after US companies and especially big tech. So the Facebooks and Googles and Apples and Qualcomms and Amazons of the world. And kind of systematically sort of like spun the wheel of fortune to see which one was next in the cycle of probes and antitrust investigations and the production of very hefty fines on a very regular basis. And again, I don't want to. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just observing. There seems to be a pattern here, and whether companies are deserving of these fines or not is one issue. I do respect the EC's role and its responsibility to make sure that European antitrust rules are followed and that consumers and markets and competitors are protected. However, it would appear, or it could appear to some, that that Margaret's focus in the last few years and success has been driven by more than just a natural desire to enforce antitrust rules and something more punitive and something more deliberate. So, having said that, I'm going to give you like a moment to respond to that, and then I'll dive into the two cases that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's been a series of fines that have come down from the EU. Just kind of doing a quick scan here. Last March in 2019, the EU fined 1.7 billion on Google. I believe Facebook. Just as recently as June, it was announced June of 19. It was almost $9.5 billion in antitrust. If I'm not mistaken, this is not Amazon's first rodeo, as Amazon has been hit in the past, or has been definitely probed in the past by the EU. And it's gone around and around. I mean, we've spent time, by the way, looking at Qualcomm, who has seen EU in terms of anti-competition, has come after it. It basically seems that if you have a big innovative tech company and you are doing business in the EU, there is a little spinning wheel, a little bit like The Price is Right.
Yep.
And Vestager has the names of every company on that. And I think periodically, as she's looking to raise funds for the EC, she spins it and sees which name has come up. Now, I'm guessing that Google and Facebook and Apple's also, by the way, been on her radar. Have maybe 2 or 3 squares on the spinning wheel, and other companies maybe only have 1. But and by the way, I'm saying all this in jest, so please note that I'm not being serious. There's no spinning wheel. Do not put that in anything you write or quote me on that, unless you also put the fact that I said I was kidding. But the point is, and I've said this, and I've been pretty outspoken. My frustration with all of the different fines brought is not the EC's protective nature. Look, China, for instance, is probably one of the most nationalistic countries in the world. It will go above and beyond in any capacity to protect its national interest. And we've seen that with the likes of Alibaba, the likes of Huawei, in terms of M&A activities, and the EC being extremely rigid and making exceptions for acquisitions that could be seen as competitive or harmful. The EU, the problem I have is it does very much feel to me like the platform of fines in the name of antitrust are being used somewhat liberally to serve as a fundraising activity due to what has been sort of a slowing innovation ecosystem across the European Union. There just hasn't been as many big hits. I mean, they still have some very innovative companies, the Nokias and the Ericssons and the SAPs, all very successful in tech. But and I'll throw this back to you, Olivier, but what really has come out of the EU in the last few years that has a Amazon, Google, Facebook trajectory? I think WhatsApp was European when it was originally founded, but then again, it was gobbled up by an American company that used it to scale. But I mean, what's really been created in the EU that has that sort of trajectory to drive growth, development, innovation, a VC ecosystem like the US? It starts to look very lopsided, like there's a little bit of a bone to pick based on the kind of slowed innovation over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some good, COVID related therapeutics and vaccines coming out of the EU. So there's stuff, but yeah, as a function of scale, when you look at the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Facebooks of the world, when it comes to tech, there are fantastic tech companies in Europe. They just don't necessarily achieve the scale financially or just even operationally until they expand. The US is a really good place to get capital and knowledge and kind of put it all together and get scale. So I get that. And then whether it comes 100% from the outside and enters the EU, or leaves the EU, goes and grows, and then comes back later, the effect is a little bit the same. But no, like I think we're kind of like saying actually pretty much exactly the same thing. It does seem that that the EC is targeting U.S. tech and, and uh, all of the time. It just seems that there's a bigger pattern and a bigger strategy at play than just the antitrust vehicle. So speaking of antitrust, let's talk about Amazon in this particular case, because there are two investigations going on, not completely simultaneously, but they're overlapping a little bit. So the first one has been going on for a while. So the investigation started about a year ago. And it has now escalated. And the reason we're talking about it is because it's just escalated to a statement of objections that the European Commission just submitted to Amazon. And now the next step is for Amazon to reply, and then there'll be oral arguments presented, and it'll be heard like a case. But that particular case focuses on mainly Amazon's private label business. And the allegation is that Amazon has been using its access to data of third-party sellers on its platform, kind of looking at their business, looking at how they're doing, and essentially using that information to copy some of their products, go to market with some of those products, and compete against those companies with the advantage of being not just another competitor, but owning the platform, operating the platform, and having access to data that their other competitors don't have. And so the argument by the EC is that this particular behavior is anti-competitive, that there's a conflict of interest, and that perhaps Amazon can be a seller on its own platform, but it can't also operate the platform and have access to all of this data. And on its face, when you first read about it, and it happened to me, my first reaction was, oh no, yeah, that's kind of, it seems unfair. But then you and I talked about it, and you pointed out that that exact behavior, someone who owns the marketplace and who operates the marketplace, copying some of their brands from the outside, third-party brands that are selling in their marketplace, and creating a private label that competes against it on the same shelf or the next shelf over, is something that grocery stores have done for decades, that many businesses have been doing for a very long time, that is absolutely not considered anti-competitive. And so the question now is, why is it suddenly anti-competitive when Amazon does it? And the answer, when I started looking into this, it started making no sense. What would be different about Amazon other than scale and other than being digital as opposed to being brick and mortar? But you can't have the same behavior as being anti-competitive in one medium and being not anti-competitive in another. And so it seems to me that it's a garbage argument. And so that opens our discussion on this particular investigation, this particular case. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of drafting a little bit off the same playbook as you. I mean, I'm glad that we had the discussion. I do think, generally speaking, it's not hard for consumers in mass to sometimes feel somewhat disenchanted by the success of big business. And when these kinds of acquisitions come out, it's kind of easy to say, yeah, you know, they're just so big, they deserve it. And the thing about it is that's just, in my book, the entirely wrong way to look at it. You had an interesting thread on your Facebook page about the marketplace, and I saw someone commented and jumped in talking about, well, if Amazon paid taxes, I wouldn't care about this or that. And then someone commented and came back in and kind of explained how a company like Amazon that buys countless buildings, builds data centers, and buys thousands of trucks, you know, they're entitled, based on the tax code that's written by legislators, to certain deductions that can oftentimes offset some income that a company has, which many times when you're making huge growth investments like Jeff Bezos and Amazon have been making, you might have more deductions than you actually created income, even when you have huge scale, because you're spending fortunes over a period of time to invest in the required underpinnings to grow a business. And I use that as an intersective example of what we're dealing with here. Is you have a perception, hey, Amazon's big, it's not fair. Well, hold on, because Walmart was big for a long time, and Walmart had store brand products all over its shelves. Walmart had one of the fiercest buying groups in the world. It was well known that you basically needed to be ready to go to war if you were going down to Arkansas to meet with the buyers at Walmart. And we also, by the way, knew that Walmart and its buyers would really have the capacity to make a company and also break a company through its very own buying, habits and the rules that it would impose on a company that wanted to be on its shelves. Target, Costco, all these companies have some of these behaviors. And private label, by the way, for these companies, I did the research. Walmart, it's 15% of their revenue. Costco, it's 20. Target, it's 33% of its business that are done with private label. Amazon, it's 1%. So all this, and granted, Amazon does $96 billion in sales in the last quarter, and 85 of them were not AWS. So 1% is not an insignificant number, Olivier, but 1% is still as a byproduct of its overall business. And here's the thing that I've learned when researching private label. For a company like Amazon with a internet-based shopping, it's digital. In many cases, the company makes more money to allow it to be sold through its fulfillment channels and through its third party than to actually take on the burden of developing, building, shelving, manufacturing, shipping products of its own label. It's actually not necessarily more profitable for the company. Now, over time and with scale, of course, that argument probably tips as you grow the private label business to be big enough. But I'm saying in some cases, it was more of an offering of convenience. See, I believe fundamentally Amazon believes in being an experienced company. We've written books on this, you and I together. And the entire development of the platform was about experience. And so this is where that second part of the argument comes into play. So beyond the private label issues is the issue of Amazon having the ability through its buying box, to pick and choose winners by determining which company actually is the
right.
click to buy.
Yeah, so now we're on the second point, but before we actually
Yeah.
investigation, I just wanted to circle back to another point. So the two reasons why I don't think, even though it looks bad for Amazon, right? Like the way that the EC is presenting their case is very coherent, it's very clear, and I think that from a PR standpoint, it makes it look like Amazon's in trouble, that Amazon did something bad, and that the EC has a really good case against them. My counter to that is they're going to have two burdens that they meet in order to convince a European court that antitrust behavior actually occurred here, and that it requires a remedy. And by the way, antitrust courts in Europe are extremely good, particularly in Germany. So we'll see where it ends up being decided. But the first point is that. The EC's prosecutors, the people arguing the case, are going to have to explain to a court or give a cogent argument as to why the behavior of Walmart and in France, Monoprix, and pretty much like I just had to throw in a little French word in there, but every grocer, every major like big box brand, whether it's Costco or somebody else, has been doing something that was perfectly legal and not anti-competitive at all these years, and why it suddenly becomes anti-competitive when it's Amazon doing it. And I think that unless they can actually explain this, and I don't see how they could, they're not going to meet the threshold that they need to meet in order to get a judgment against Amazon, or judgment against Amazon that will stick and that will actually survive appeals. The second point is that the way that fines are calculated for cases like this, the EC will impose a fine up to 10% of the offending company of the offending company's annual revenue. So when you look at a company that derives 11% of its revenue from private label sales, and that's used the kind of scheme that's alleged here, then it makes financial sense. It actually makes sense because even if you end up having to pay that 10% fine, the value of your revenue from your private label brand is actually greater than the fine. So you could say you're still going to end up in the black, and so it's worth the shot. It's worth the risk. It's worth waiting for the EC to spin the wheel and for that wheel to land on you 4 or 5 years down the road, right? But so for Target, it would make sense. For Walmart, it would make sense. For Costco, it would make sense. For Amazon, which derives 1% of its sales revenue from its private label brand, it makes no financial sense. So there's not even a motive for Amazon to try to risk this. So that's another point that they're going to have to explain. Any crime, whether it's anti-competitive behavior or murder or robbery, it doesn't matter. You have to you have to prove motive, not just intent and opportunity. And there's really no motive. It makes no sense. So I think they're going to have some trouble with that, and I think that's why Amazon might not be as in as big a trouble as some articles may make it sound. So yes. So to your point, the second, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, obviously, thanks for digging in. Of course, in Europe, and you and I have gone back and forth on this a little bit, from an educational standpoint, up to 10%, which means it can be anything from 0 to 10.
Right.
It's very arbitrary, meaning the amounts don't seem to have there's no calculus here. It's basic arithmetic at best. Like, how much is the rent going to be on this building we're in for the next 12 years? All right, that's how much we're going to find. No, I'm kidding. But the point is like, usually when you're looking at damages, right? When you look in in most cases, the damages are generated based upon a very specific expectation of how the market impact has been determined, market impact, and then it's kind of like remuneration for that. In this case, it's not always very clear. And one thing I said, and I think you and I both have put this out there, is the EU's burden of proof in order to place a fine, to impose a fine, is much lower. So there has been some speculation, and this is kind of a sidebar topic because we're talking about the EU, but generally speaking, there's been some tendencies in the past for US lawmakers and regulators to follow the acts of FTCs and competitive commissions around the world if a fine is imposed, to also investigate and seek action. And while the EU could basically take all the things we're saying and identify very little calculatable damage from these behaviors, it can still decide almost willy-nilly to still impose a fine. So Amazon, even if it is able to clear its name through the fight here in terms of being able to prove it did not do anything wrong, the EU could still decide to impose a fine. Whereas, like I said, in the US, you'd really have a much higher burden of proof. And that's why I do believe these arguments would really struggle to get footing in the US. Having said all that, I also want to just say it is very important in my perspective that regulatory bodies continually investigate the biggest companies in the world, because competition does matter. And the ability for small companies to compete does matter. These big companies have the power at times to be, when their ambition is to grow stock price and to grow revenue, sometimes some of the behaviors, even if not malicious, can still become anti-competitive. So it's good to have bodies out there. I don't want to make light of that. And I want to make sure I'm very clear about that, because at times this can be very important. For Amazon, though, its marketplace, in my opinion, has led to more growth for small businesses than larger companies. Not to mention, 2020 just seems like an odd year to attack a company that I believe has created, by a pretty wide margin, more jobs than any other company in the world. So yes, they're big. Yes, the company deserves to be scrutinized. This seems frivolous to me. And let's touch on the second item before we wrap up here, because there is another item that also leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to determining if Amazon is in fact in the wrong.
Yeah. So this is a second case that was, I think, kind of brought forward by third-party sellers who were not happy about what they saw as a sort of kind of pressure tactic by Amazon to push them towards signing up or opting in to Amazon's logistics services. And so here, what you have are third-party sellers, and I don't know if everyone knows this, but Amazon is a marketplace. When people say don't buy from Amazon, buy local, or buy from small businesses, it's a little bit contradictory, because Amazon is a big business, but it's a conduit. It's a marketplace for a lot of small businesses and a lot of local businesses. They just use Amazon as a platform to sell their goods and get them to us. So supporting Amazon, for the most part, does support small businesses and can absolutely support local. But so you have some some businesses on there that can essentially, you have options when you're working with Amazon and you're selling products in their marketplace, and you have the option to use their logistics and their delivery systems, which are, as we know, excellent, or taking care of it yourself. And what's happening is that some companies, some sellers, are not happy, that they feel pressured um, by Amazon to opt into those logistics and delivery services, um, because if they don't feel that they feel like they're not having access to a what's something called a buy box. And so when you're shopping on Amazon, and you're looking through different vendors, different stores, occasionally you're going to see a buy box that pops up that allows you to put items from a particular seller directly into your shopping cart. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it doesn't. And what Amazon alleges is that the buy box appears based on a number of features, a number of factors, and it's all based on an algorithm that's essentially kind of figuring out what the best option is, or what it thinks the best option is for the customer at the time. These third party sellers who have not opted in to the logistics option feel that they're being kept out of having access to this buy box, which is a huge boon because most sales on Amazon come through buy box clicks. And so they feel that unless that Amazon is trying to pressure them into signing up for their logistics package, and that once they do, they will have access to the buy box, and they're claiming that that's anti-competitive. It's a little bit convoluted. It's a little bit strange. My view of this, having looked at it, is that as Daniel was saying earlier, this is Amazon is an experience company, and when people buy from Amazon, the entire experience from start to finish is an Amazon experience, even if you're buying from a third-party seller on the platform, which means that the checkout, the delivery, the speed of delivery, the method of delivery, the reliability of the entire experience falls on Amazon. And if a vendor screws it up somewhere along the way because they're using their own method of delivery, it's still going to be Amazon that the customer is going to blame for any problems along the way. And what's happening here is that Amazon, especially when it comes to Prime customers and the Prime experience of easy checkout, lower prices, free fast delivery, Amazon wants to prioritize businesses that are Prime businesses that focus on the entire experience and opt into the optimal logistics and delivery package. And so I think that on the one hand, you have this algorithm making these decisions that aren't punitive, that I don't think are deliberately trying to pressure anyone into anything. Um, but at the same time, I think that Amazon also would have the right to do this, even if they were doing it deliberately, because they have the right to control the experience from start to finish for their customers. And then it becomes a matter of contract law. I think becomes a matter of disclosure and choices. Um, but I think, and that's a really important point. And I'm sorry to be monologuing here, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States um, just issued a really interesting decision in its final verdict, if you will, on the case between Qualcomm and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And they made a really, really important point, which was to clarify that sometimes things, legal cases, disputes between regulators and companies, or small and big companies that feel like they're being unfair to one another, are matters of contract law and not antitrust law. And in this particular case, a vendor not being happy with the way that they're treated because they're not happy with the terms of their contract falls squarely into the category of contract law, not antitrust. And so I don't even think this is a legitimate antitrust case, honestly. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting take on a case that sort of was unrelated, and but it was important in the sense of sometimes you come to terms and you work out a bad business deal. Sometimes nobody's forcing any company to participate in Amazon's marketplace. There are other marketplaces out there. I said, if any company really has a marketplace that needs a lot of scrutiny, it's Apple's US marketplace for apps. When you have over 50% of the market and you have no choice but to participate to the terms and pay the 30% toll to be part of that marketplace with no end around. You can't even get your apps in without actually logging in and becoming a participant in the Apple ecosystem. You can be on a eBay, you can go on Etsy, you can be on Wayfair. I mean, there's marketplaces, and not all of them Shopify, not all of them are Amazon. Amazon is the biggest. Amazon does drive the visibility and has the trust, but that's what you're paying for. You're paying because, you know what I said? Do you remember in the beginning when we had this argument? I said, Olivia, when you go on Amazon, you don't think about the third party. You go, this is an Amazon transaction. I trust that this product or service will be delivered to me because I did the purchase through a trusted company, using a trusted experience, giving trusted data to a company that I trust to handle it. Now, there are these third parties and they're all connected, but Amazon handles that. Amazon manages it. It makes sure. And so if Amazon kind of says, look, we want the experience for our consumers that we pay for traffic acquisition, we drive them to our site, we advertise, we market, right? If we want the experience to be as good as possible by using more of our vertically integrated and horizontally integrated supply chain, this isn't about anti-competition. This is about experience. And so I kind of am, I'm kind of remiss to just say it would be a bad idea for Amazon to favor. Now, having said that, Amazon actually denies that it makes that preference through any sort of automation.
Right.
So there's a burden of proof that the EU is actually should seek. And again, the EU might not have to seek it, but it should seek that burden of proof. And then the second thing is, if I was Amazon, I'm not sure I wouldn't want to take that approach, because that approach would be more ensuring that my customers, the ones that are going to pick next time whether to come back to Amazon or go to Walmart or go to Target or go to Shopify or Dick's Sports or wherever it is you went, but you picked Amazon, to have the best possible end-to-end fulfillment experience. It shouldn't really be anti-competitive. It should be the job of the company to want to deliver that great experience. So again, to Ms. Vestager and what she's trying to do, look, investigate, pay attention, limit anti-competitive behavior. These are good things for the world. However, the whole idea of anti-competition is harm to the consumer. The consumers, because of Amazon throughout this entire pandemic, have been able to get the products, services, the foods, the staples, the critical goods, the PPP, the face masks, basically anything you need, laptop computers, basketballs, home fitness equipment, has been largely in many places because of Amazon. So yes, I am a little bit in favor to what the company's done. I'm also looking at the situation where we had unemployment rise by millions and millions of people, and this company was creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, by the way, at a minimum threshold of $15 an hour. So penalizing a company for success and penalizing a company that is trying largely to do good things bothers me. Now, again, big companies always have there's always wormholes. Of course, when you get this big, to stay this big, you're going to be aggressive. You're going to sometimes stomp on some small players. I'm not sitting here saying, as a bigger player, that's really what growth is all about in our world, and especially in a capitalistic market like the US. I just kind of think if I was looking at this from afar, I would say there are probably other places to look, whether that's at Amazon or outside of Amazon, that would be much more compelling than these particular tracks that she's on. And so I'm hoping that whatever it is, it moves on. And like I said, I just don't see this coming to the US anytime soon.
No, I don't think. I mean, it might try. I mean, we've seen some movement by states attorneys general and Congress to try to break up big tech, and that's going to have to be a conversation for another day. But this kind of falls into this. But again, with this particular case, the one that's just beginning to be investigated by the European Commission, I don't think, and this isn't completely entirely a legal argument, because I don't know what the statutes are in Europe and what the rules actually say specifically on this point. But generally speaking, on the whole, no one is being kept out of the Amazon marketplace. Everyone has access to it. The level of access that companies can have on the platform are not infinite, but there are different levels of it. And when you're a third party seller entering a marketplace, you have to understand what the best way to get the most out of your investment is. In other words, it's kind of like the gamification of business. If you're working with Amazon, you have to learn the ins and outs of how to maximize your impact on the platform. And Amazon kind of gamifies the process and gives you a lot of different options and things that you can do to have control over how much reach you have on the platform and how effective you are. And when companies decide, no, I don't want, I choose not to use this. I feel that they also choose not to have access to some of the value add features that you would get as a result of gaming the system, gaming the Amazon system. And so I don't see how there's any reasonable expectation by any business that if they decide, if they opt out of certain features on the platform, I don't see how there can be any reasonable expectations that they should have access through an algorithm that is completely objective or because of other reasons. Why they feel that they should have access to value add features that they haven't done the work to have access to. Like it makes zero sense to me. It's like trying to get a premium membership to a market while paying the absolute minimum fee of entry. You kind of have to put in what you get out, and I feel that those companies are um, trying to create an antitrust case out of thin air. And I don't. It's definitely not going to stick in the United States, and I don't see how it actually goes anywhere with the EU either.
Yeah, look, losing to a better team is not really does not really provide the right to a legal complaint. Although, thanks to jurisprudence, you can sue anybody for anything, and in this world, that does happen from time to time. But very interesting discussion, Olivier. Thanks for diving into this with me. Everybody, definitely, we will update the show notes to add the full-on report, not to mention my analyst brief research note that I published late last week. This is a ongoing investigation. This news will continue to break. Big tech will continue to be under the watchful eyes of regulatory bodies around the world. I can guarantee you in 2020 and beyond. And Futurum Research here, myself, Olivier, and our whole team will be on top of that, both on our site and here on the Futurum Tech webcast and podcast. So for now, for this episode, we got to say goodbye. We really appreciate you tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you join our community, whether you subscribe to us on YouTube, you subscribe to us on Spotify, you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. We enjoy each and every week having our community of listeners. We hope that we're keeping you entertained and informed. And we hope, by the way, if you didn't hear me before, that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving or that you had it, depending on when you're listening to it. But for now, goodbye. I'll see you later.